history ain't bad. Let's see what the... That and oh yeah, I got the yellow screen. Nice. Hey, one good thing about that this goofy yellow screen, it's really easy to spot. All right. Without no, wait, not doing nothing without that. That's my whole story. Or my sorry people, I'm having a coffee malfunction. Solved shortly. Oh yeah. Coffee malfunction. All right, people ready to go? Let's do this. Let's do this. All right, that's good. That's good. And I apologize. All right, we'll get into it. Let me actually start the show. Hello and welcome to the Technocrat Live. I'm your host, Matthew Newhall, and thank you so much for joining me tonight. Sorry if I'm running a little late. I know some people might have an appointment at 9 p.m. Who knows why, but if you do, I don't want to get in the way. So this will be done lickety-split as soon as I tell you about how everything is going terribly wrong. You know how that goes. So, oh, wait, gotta get this... What? Let's go. Come on. All right. So, sorry about that. I had technical difficulties. I'm still learning this whole. I'm still learning how to deal with this whole teleprompter thing, but I'm getting there. So, so TTL Sex Tech episode number 1 is finally up. Multiple places. It's now on YouTube and it's on Odyssey, and actually I put it up on X too. I'm going to be putting all my short editorials up on X. I'm probably not going to stream to X. I actually experimented with it a bit, and I'm not happy. I just don't. I'm not liking the easy use. Rumble's pretty difficult too, but it's more consistent. So that's kind of what I need, you know, in the chaos without an editor. I'm the host and the editor. I'm the tech too. So I'm probably going to stop rolling out new technologies. If you have a problem with YouTube and Odyssey and Rumble, let me know. And maybe there'll be a way to accommodate you. I'll listen. No guarantees, though, because it's already pretty hectic trying to get this all these different technologies going at the same time. Hopefully I'm up. I don't see anyone complaining, so I guess that's good. No news is good news. So today I've got the Dystopia Report for you. So if you haven't heard, tech is running amok. If somehow you didn't know, I actually have a new segment on the show. I have interviews too. I have a bunch of interviews that I'm trying to set up. I'm going to hit you with a whole schedule at once. But I just want to make sure that my whole... studio experience is fairly streamlined. I mean, and when I say streamlined, it still takes the better part of an hour to set up, even with everything mostly set up, and I just have to hit a bunch of switches, but I have to test everything to make sure it's going to work. All right, without further ado, let's get into Dystopia Report, and this is the tech government section. Wow. I actually thought there was a chance this day would never come, but the big news of the week is that Julian Assange is finally free. He is the founder of WikiLeaks, in case you didn't know for some reason, and he's reached a plea deal with the United States. He was being held captive on behalf of the United States in the UK, having to do with crimes of state crimes. Originally, he was arrested supposedly for a sex crime, which he was then later cleared of, but he never managed to escape the consulate he was taking refuge in, and then eventually ended up in a UK jail on behalf of the United States. He has now returned to Australia. He is with his family. He managed to get a flight. It had to be privately funded, but he took a privately funded flight to Australia. Australia has been a little draconian lately, so I'm not really sure if he's safe there. If for some reason you don't know what WikiLeaks is, it spearheaded next-level anonymous leaks, often targeting governments, state apparatuses inside of governments, including the biggest governments of the world, a.k.a. the superpowers, including, of course, the United States, but also countries that the United States would consider to be enemies as well. The curious question is why? Why did they release him now? Does that really make sense after a decade? And I kind of was pondering on this for 2 days or 3 days, and nobody really, they were trying to chase the ability to extradite him to the United States, and it never quite happened. Why suddenly in this time? Well, I mean, in the United States, there's election season, and I was thinking that maybe that was why. Maybe it was for political points, but there was almost no communication about it, which doesn't make sense. Like, if you're gonna take a political or strategic hit for political points, usually you talk about it. So I'm like, what is going on there? And then it hit me. So if you don't know, Farah, I don't want to say his name, sorry. There's a political party in the UK that I have a, hold on a second, let me just pause this goofiness. I have a rule here on the Technocrat Live. I do not discuss politics. So I almost just broke my rule, but and I'm sorry about that. But it's really simple. I just don't discuss the names of political parties or politicians. Just removing those two sets of words is amazingly positive at not triggering people. And I consider myself to be pretty good at politics and was interested in it long before the negative feedback loop of machine learning started encouraging people to kick the crap out of each other on political topics. And I find most of the debate from most people to be uninspiring. Let's just say that. So I just don't want to get into it. It's just like I feel like I'm wrestling in the mud. But it doesn't mean that there aren't laws and government actions that don't affect tech. In fact, quite the opposite. There's a whole section, we're in it, in the Dystopia Report called Tech Government. So, anyway, so there's an emergent party with being spearheaded by an established politician in the UK, and it looks like a major political upset. And I have a feeling that the current political structure in the United States probably will not be able to influence them as heavily as they can the current party that's in charge in England. So that's, of course, where he was being held. I think maybe they just realized they're about to lose him. It was either make a deal and try to get something for it, or maybe the UK is just going to let him free. So I'm really glad for him. I'm glad it worked out. It is possible that if he held out longer, that he might have just been able to walk scot-free and they just would have let him out the front door. But, you decide for yourself. Look it up. I have my opinion. But anyway, so lots and lots of quote-unquote credible news sources are covering this. I just listed a CNN URL. Talk about them in a little while. Anyway, so also in tech government, huge news, or at least what almost looks like news. We're not getting a ton of confirmation from the press, but the Federal Reserve supposedly has been hacked by the Lockbit hacker group. The Federal Reserve, the United States Federal Reserve, the ones who essentially loan all American dollars into existence, which is more or less the still loosely considered to be, there's some arguments about that, but still loosely considered to be the world's reserve currency, and all of a sudden all the data about who's doing what with it, and maybe some of the currency too, are at risk due to Lockbit. Supposedly they have BitLocked, some portion of the federalreserve.gov website. They say they have illicit data from them available. They haven't really been available to comment once it went up on their site, and which is probably because they all died in a black op as soon as they published it. No, I'm just kidding. That's a joke, dark humor. But yeah, they might all be dead. I'm not sure. If they're not, a lot of people are saying, "Oh, this might be state actors." People say that about everything, and I just kind of laugh. Maybe not this time. Maybe it really is state actors, because a lot of individual organizations might realize that they've hacked into that particular group of people and went, oh, like that moment in Sneakers, if you know that movie. Yeah, they kind of, when they started, they actually broke into the Federal Reserve and went, wait a minute, we're going to get in big trouble. And they weren't going to get in big trouble. So it was listed on June 23rd. And the problem, for sure, the Federal Reserve has got everything backed up. I mean, this just seems too insane. The problem is, of course, restoring things, especially on live websites, especially when it comes to financial markets, is very difficult. You really need to have a live hot spare running that can just take over. And if there was a security hole, that probably would be affected too. So we're talking downtime. Also PR, depending on what records exactly they're willing to leak. This could humiliate or embarrass large moneyed parties, be it state or private. Anyway, so they have 33 terabytes of data at stake. So I picked up the data from the website Tweaktown, but there are images of this claim by about Lockbit all over the place. So look for it yourself. Uber is locking drivers out of their apps during slow hours in New York. Apparently this is a thing in LA too, and this is rather than pay them minimum wage. Lyft is threatening to do the same. They haven't done it yet, but apparently one of the things, the way that these two states' minimum wage laws are written, essentially if, at least the perception from the lawyers and the apps is, if they're logging into the app, they're working, and they got to be paid minimum wage, and these companies don't want to pay those people, the drivers, unless they have fares. So, I mean, I get that, but at the same time, it sure seems a little, all these tech companies are very ethical until it affects their own bottom line, and then they're like, it's just a cannon of human cannon fodder, just a conveyor belt of human cannon fodder just being shot out in front of them and just running them over. It's just like there's just people being poured out the front of a bus as it runs them over. So, yay, we're ethical until it's going to cost us $1, and then we'll kill you all. Anyway, be interesting to see how that plays out. I'll let you, I'll skip the commentary on what those laws mean and if they're good or they're bad, but you should know it, be aware that it's happening, because we could be seeing strikes or something coming from this. Apparently CNN, here's CNN back in the news, and this broke today. So apparently CNN is made a bunch of changes last minute to the presidential debate in the United States. Again, remember, I'm not going to talk parties or individuals, but I will talk pretty much everything else. And this is, kind of leaning towards the case that I've been making, that we're a technocracy. We're not really a democracy anymore. So they are excluding they've made a bunch of changes, and I'm not going to discuss them all. I encourage you to go look them up, to the format and how they're going to be doing things. But the one that really drove me crazy, because it's just so insane, and it actually proves a point of mine, is that they're excluding the White House press pool from the USA presidential debate. They made a bunch of changes to the debate rules at the last minute, including who could attend and how they're going to proceed. It's not going to be quite live. It's going to be quasi-live. I think that I'll just give that an honorable mention, because, of course, one of the reasons I had this show as a live show is, I'm not lying. It's just not worth the money to try to replace me with AI or something. But at a presidential level, that is very plausible. So depending on the delay and the computational power, I assume it's essentially infinite, available, it is possible to alter things. There's really nobody there but CNN to confirm what's happening on the stage. And it's a little terrifying. But the thing that's really interesting is that because they're eliminating the White House press pool, they're essentially CNN. This isn't even like a lot of people might be tempted to, get mad and blame it on like the political party that's currently in the White House or something for trying to give them a home court advantage. But this is actually worse than that. Like, the press pool is the members of the press that the White House either thinks are their friends or just cannot find a reason to kick them out of the press pool, right? Those are the people in the White House press pool. In other words, these are the most vetted members of the political press in the world. And CNN will not let them attend the debate live. That is insane. I mean, that is not democratic at all. That's a company deciding what the political outcome should be. Oligarchy, just flat out. So, and the thing that really drives me crazy about this is that, whoever's in the White House, whatever company versus White House is happening, this is an insult to the White House. Like saying that you can't figure out how to pick people to be in your press corps. So we'll pick. What? Anyway, so I'm glad that we finally are all on the same page about Umbrella Corporation. But and by the way, in case you're just like, oh, I'm being partisan, I'm absolutely not. But in case you're like, oh, I'm being partisan or something, this is every other press organization that isn't directly affiliated with CNN is squelching about this. Some more loudly, some more quietly. I got this from MSNBC. I have a link from the Post. The rest of the press is like, what are you doing? Yeah, so really not good. I'm so sorry, but this is one of the reasons. If you're ever like, why does Matt go through the trouble of having a live show? And this is it. Because, who wants to listen and make what somebody's saying part of their understanding, their worldview, especially when it comes to politics, especially when time is of the essence, and then find out that they've been duped, right? So you don't have to worry about that happening with me here. Okay, that's enough from tech government. I want to take a bath. That's enough government for one day. Let's get on to tech. EV prices are falling drastically. This is kind of bad news if you think a car is an investment. A lot of people think that. Some people think that early on. Cars can be investments. They have been considered to be pieces of art and have become very expensive, especially if they're unusual or rare model. But usually it's a terrible investment. It's just an appliance to get you from point A to point B. You may love it. You may make it into more. That's on you. Great for you. I'm not trashing enthusiasts. I am one. But, they're not an investment. So a cheap EV has gone down $12,000 from $40,000 in a year. On the used market. So, that's just about a 33% drop in the price of the same used EV in a year. So there's a couple of reasons this could be happening. One of them is that people are displeased with EVs. I'll get into that a little bit later. Used EVs can be risky, and this is specifically an EV problem, but only an EV problem right now. This is something that, just based on previous tech news on the show, like the past few weeks, there's a pretty good chance that this is going to solve itself. That batteries are going to become much higher quality and perhaps even longer life. And as battery quality goes up, this becomes less of a problem. But a lot of EV owners, somewhere between 5 years and 10 years, depending on how hard they use the car, are going to face a catastrophic battery replacement. These batteries fail, and they're typically, and the way the companies are packaging them, selling them, you have to buy the whole pack. Probably because they're high voltage, and there's some liability risk with changing them out and servicing them. So, shade tree mechanics might just kill themselves. It's a possibility. Of course, there's lots of things in cars that can kill yourself when you're fixing it. So that's not something new. It's a little parental. Anyway, so another possible reason, of course, is that they can't actually repair or manipulate these cars cheaply on their own. Speaking of which, there's the next story. And in case you were curious, this is ISEEcars.com, but it's out there. There's other sources on this information. I mean, it's car sale price data. It's public. So 49% of EV owners want to go back to gas engines in the United States. Holy cow. So, of course, why is this happening? Well, one of them is some of them, but not 49% because it's too soon. But some of them may have already faced that catastrophic battery cost and thought, oh, what a bargain. I'm getting a car that essentially takes no maintenance for 40,000 miles, and then boom, $15,000 charge for replacing the battery, and then you only get another 10 years out of that, and that's terrible. But that's not it, because it's too soon. The bulk of EV owners have become EV owners in the past year or two. We're still asymptoting up. So why would they want to go back to gas engines? Some people are just saying it's not true, but I see no reason to think that this study isn't true. In fact, I think those people are just angry and not thinking straight. I think this is right to repair. You can't and people who code or in code know how this works. You can't modify or repair them. You can't get parts for a lot of EVs the way you can for gas cars. There's not a lot of companies making cheap generic parts for EVs. So even you can't just go to an aftermarket company like Dorman, who's a very popular one, and just buy a brake caliper, because there's probably a freaking chip in it. And that chip has got a piece of code, which you need, because otherwise it will not connect to the car, that has a digital signature in it, because it's hiding behind the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, because you signed a contract, inherently, a copyright contract-based contract, that said you can't repair the car. You agreed to it. And there are states that don't allow that kind of contract. Law always supersedes contracts. This is one of the places we need the government to protect us. So 49% of the people out there are demoralized because they can't modify or customize their cars, and it's very expensive to maintain them when something does go wrong. And you know what? That's the government's fault. That is absolutely the government's fault, because they really need to get on right to repair. In fairness to the tech companies, not the EV companies, but the other tech companies, they've been all over this. I think they see the danger because they're not direct investors in EVs, although they probably are interested because of their own ethics. The lack of a right to repair affects their hardware needs, and they run massive data centers. So they're kind of the good guys in this case. I picked this story up from the Post. But yeah, this is bad. We don't want people to want to go back to gas-powered cars. They're not going back because they're worse. They're going back because freedom's gone. You're right. You don't really own it. You just quasi-own it. Anyway, next story. Thieves have started jamming Wi-Fi cameras and cell phones to rob homes. So let me just frame this for you. If you're over 60. Right, you grow up in a world of what the phone company calls POTS telephone lines. They're just copper pairs running on poles to your house. If lightning hits them, they fry your phone, or they fry whatever's connected to them. And you're used to having a hard line to your house. And if someone doesn't climb up on a pole, which is a huge risk, and cut a line, you have a way to call the police and get them there very quickly. Well, that's not reality for most of Gen X and younger. POTS lines are expensive, needlessly expensive, and they're just not. They don't maintain them anymore. Everything goes through one internet connection, and most people have that internet connection routed through the included router that came from their ISP. That's not great on its own, But that's not even really the problem here. The problem here is that they then connect everything on their network through Wi-Fi. So they have two wireless ways to communicate with the outside world coming out of their house, and that's their cell phone, and that's Wi-Fi. And the police actually produced a picture of a fairly beefy-looking, kind of look cool, to be honest, fairly beefy-looking Wi-Fi jammer that also jams cell phones. They simply walk into your backyard, turn this thing on, wait to see if there's a reaction going on inside, and if there isn't, all the cameras are off and all cell phones are jammed if they're wrong in somebody's home. Not only can they break in your house and there's no evidence that they did it, but you can't even call the police. You're just stuck in there with them. So fortunately, the cases in the story that I'm covering here, the thieves ran away when they realized someone was home. But this is a huge problem. Of course, what do the police say? The police say, "Oh, you should get a landline." Yeah, okay. Like everybody has $50 to throw at a 911 line. Verizon also, in addition to that, Verizon has said flat out that POTS lines are obscure and they're deprioritized. In other words, if you have a POTS line going to your house, even if you ordered it now and you're willing to pay the $50 a month, they're not going to repair it if something happens to the line between your house and their building, or they'll repair it last. So, someone can do something to a pole upstream from you and get a whole block. So that's not really a solution either. Of course, the cops aren't technocrats. Most people aren't. That's one of the problems with the society where nobody's got the rudder. Nobody's on the steering wheel. So there is a possibility, and I hope that this reaches lots of people, to protect yourself. Well, just like you got that router with the wireless and everything in your house is connected to the wireless, consider getting a aftermarket VoIP phone. Don't get the VoIP phone from your ISP. Get a VoIP phone, but get one that has a wired connection. Typically, those wireless access point components of your firewall that is supplied by your ISP also have physical jacks in the back of them. Get a VoIP phone, plug your physical jack into the VoIP phone and directly into your firewall. And then if all of the wireless in the region gets jammed because somebody's planning on robbing you or worse, you can just pick up your VoIP phone and call 911. It is mandatory for a lot of phones, although check your supplier. A lot of phones will charge a not necessarily cheap fee for 911 service. So most VoIP phone services will provide 911. So look into it for yourself. There's tons of them, maybe a dozen or 2 dozen, and it could be as cheap as they look to be about $15 a month. So way cheaper than 50, more reasonable, and bonus, you actually have customer service. If something happens to the line, you'll get help, as opposed to the POTS line where they'll be like, we'll fix it when we get to it. Okay, that's it for that story. On to space. Starliner is not going home. So in case you didn't notice, in case you don't remember from last time, I mentioned Boeing Starliner actually got all the way up to the ISS. It was actually an unmanned flight up to the ISS, and it's now docked there. Originally, it was scheduled to return to Earth a few days ago. It didn't. And actually, a lot of people might be like, oh, what's going on? Is something wrong with it? Ha, 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 Boeing. I mean, the jokes write themselves. It's too easy. But honestly, I think they were just like, it's so much better without SpaceX or Russian Ubers just sitting out there with the meter running, which is kind of what was happening when those were kind of the monopolies. But this is the point of having commercialized space travel. Now you'll have options. Maybe Boeing's not running the meter to leave the thing sitting out there, and the astronauts can return home when they want. So we're really just looking at the technical restrictions of when they can return home. So, they're taking a hot shower, they're doing the makeup. Really, they were supposed to depart June 25th, but it could be as late as maybe the middle of August. Anyway, theregister.com for more information. Kind of curious. I'm kind of curious when they leave and why and who comes back to Earth. I think it's currently 2 astronauts that are scheduled to come back. On to science. I could have made that science and space one thing, but I just like saying space and science. They're both good words. Space and science. All right. So Gilead, a private company. I always cite academic sources, but this is a trial, so I think I can just say Gilead. I think that's enough. Has been in phase 3 trials for an HIV resistant shot. Now, let me make this clear. Phase 3 is the final human trial before something can be sold to the public as a permanent, as a approved FDA drug, right? Phase 3 is it. And they passed their phase 3 trials. We now have an HIV resistance treatment. And I'm saying resistance loosely. It's actually way better than that. You know, science is usually the good news section, so I save it for last so people don't just watch Dystopia Report and, throw themselves in front of a train because, the tech news is pretty bad and it can be pretty depressing. But, there's usually, especially with post-CRISPR, there's a lot of good news in the gene space. Anyway, so there's either 2 shots twice a year or there's a daily pill option. Anyway, the human trial had 2,000 female participants and 0 infections. Let me repeat that. 2,000 participants in the phase 3 trial. There were 0 HIV infections. Nobody got AIDS. 2,000 people. Nobody got AIDS. Wow. Holy cow. This is really good news. It looks like we finally beat AIDS. Anyway, so they're looking for it to be in market 2025. I usually don't report on this, but it did look like the stock went up. Might not be such a bad thing to check out. Anyway, so good job, Gilead. Thank you for making the world a better and safer place. And and maybe this will become the subject of another sex tech talk real soon. By the way, I have I originally was calling it Civ Tech, but I may actually call it Web Tech. I have a Web Tech section coming up. Another short talk talking about what's going on. We'll see. Anyway, it's really good. This one's going to be a game changer. In fact, I think I might push this one really hard. It's going to tick off some people, but I'll tell you, copyright and AI, it's getting weird, people. Anyway, thank you so much for tuning into the Dystopia Report and the Technocrat Live. I love you all. Again, I'm on Rumble, Odyssey, and YouTube. And you can also follow me on Twitter if you just want the editorials. Great. I'll see you guys next week. Watch for that web tech. Choose wisely. Choose to share. Good night, everyone.